Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be when this video reaches you. We are still moving and taking a dive into the DSM-5, and in this video, we are going to be going over the neurodevelopmental disorders that are listed in the DSM-5. These are not each and every one of them. These are just kind of like some of the main ones that I have seen come up in different questions on AATBS and some of the Jerry Grossman exams. So I decided to just do these since they seem to have like a pattern with them, and hopefully if you do see them on the exam, you will be able to answer the questions and navigate those questions much easier. So the overview of neurodevelopmental disorders, they start in the early developmental periods. This is before a person starts to go to school, and this is your personal, your social, academic functioning that child has. It is also about the developmental of the brain and the nervous system, right? So your attention, your ability to learn, motor skills, communication, your memory is all included in what could be kind of like going kind of like haywire when it comes to your neurodevelopmental disorders. The first one that we are going to speak about is intellectual disability, formerly known as mental retardation, but it's now known as ID, right? And the core features, it is going to be mainly the deficits in intellectual functioning. That is your problem solving, planning, your abstract thinking, your reasoning, your communication, right? But it has nothing to do with your IQ scores, right? It has absolutely nothing to do with that. Your deficit in your adaptive functioning, can you independently live on your own? Can you independently take care of things such as taking a bath, ironing your clothes, cooking your food, right? Social participation. Socially, how are you when it comes to you communicating with other people, rather if it's just an individual person or if it is a large group of people? This occurs at the onset of the developmental period, right? There is different levels of severity, mild, moderate, or severe. And whether if it's mild, moderate, or severe, it is based on your adaptive functioning. Okay? Now, Autism Spectrum Disorder, this is ASD. Do not get this confused with acute stress disorder because they kind of like have the same acronyms. But yes, Autism Spectrum Disorder. This is your social communication and your interaction deficits. I think that if you have worked with any children that is diagnosed with ASD, it makes it so much easier for you to navigate those questions when it comes to the exam. I work with kids on the spectrum every single day at my therapeutic day school. Navigating these, I had one question like that on my exam. Navigating those types of questions come easy because I work with them and I'm able to like understand the behaviors, the different patterns, the communication that comes with children that are diagnosed with ASD. So back and forth conversations, it's like it's every day where it's like drop the rope, okay, just like kind of move on, because they kind of like struggle with that, as well as sharing emotions or initiating some of those social interactions. It's like a huge struggle for them sometimes. Eye contact, it's kind of major for some, but not all of them. Clocking like facial expressions, body language, or even like jokes, humor, sometimes it's a struggle and they're not going to be able to understand it, right? Difficulty making friends. I have seen it and then I haven't. I also work with some kids that they don't have issues with making friends, right? They don't have those issues where they are just adjusting to the different changes in a schedule or meeting someone else new. But there are some that do struggle with that. The social emotional reciprocity, right? It's like, well, how do you think that you make the other person feel when you said those things to them? And some of my kids will tell you quickly, I don't know. I don't know, and I don't know, and I don't get it. That is the social emotional aspect that we are speaking about when it comes to the autism spectrum disorder. Here is some of the core symptoms and the features of ASD. And again, like I said, if you work with these children, if you've done it in the past before, if you're recently doing it now, you recognize everything that is before you on this page right now. The restricted, the repetitive behaviors, right, or activities, right, stereotyped or repetitive movements, speech or object use. The hand flapping is, I see that some of my younger ones I've seen it with, and then I have some of the teenagers that also the hand flapping. The lining up of toys and objects, I have not seen that from any kids that I work with, but I do hear that that is something that a child that is diagnosed with ASD will do, right? Inflexible adherence to the routines. I do have a kid that when it comes time for routine and the changes and stuff, it's a huge trigger for him, right? The fixated interest. I do have a kid that is fixated on rats. He loves rats. He can talk to you until the cows come home about rats. He has pictures of them. He speaks about them. He teaches you about them, right? Intense focus on it's just the intense focus on specific topics. I also had a kid who was really, really into trains. He would have his YouTube channel up and those trains just come in and the sound of the horn from the train is just so... It's very intriguing to him, and he's very fixated on. He teaches you about trains, what this does, what a motor looks like, and what this does. Those are the fixated interests that they speak about when a child is diagnosed with ASD, right? Adverse response to the sounds. That is very, very, very big. Lights that are too bright. At my school, we do have some of the lights and we cover them to dim them if they are too bright. The sounds, the fascination with certain things. I have a kid that loves to have a clock and he just to spin the hands on the clock. So these are all the core symptoms of autism spectrum disorder. So pay attention to these when you see them on the exam. There is a difference between ASD symptoms and social pragmatic communication disorder, and we will get into that. Symptoms must present in early developmental period, right? I don't know if I've ever heard an adult being diagnosed with ASD that hasn't been, diagnosed as a child already. So I don't know about that. But ASD can be co-diagnosed with ID. So keep that in mind. I think there was a question like that in the group this week that it was they were camaraderie with each other with ASD and ID. So here it is, the different levels, the different severity levels of ASD. And the level 1 is you requiring support, social difficulties noticeable without support, and the inflexible behaviors. Those are some of the kids that I work with, where they require some support, but they don't really need the support, but sometimes they do kind of get triggered when the schedule is trying to change. Level 2, requiring substantial support that is a marked deficits in communication and difficulty coping with change. We do have some like that, where it's it doesn't matter if you set this timer in front of them and letting them know, hey, the next period is about to start or the next activity is about to start, is a huge trigger for them. They have a difficult time coping with the change in the class period. Level 3 is requiring very substantial support. It's great distress. It's the severe communication. I've had people ask me about kids that are diagnosed with ASD that they are nonverbal. Some of them can be nonverbal when it comes to the different levels and the different severity of ASD. So keep that in mind when it comes to the exam. If you have a question that is asking you about the different severities of ASD, it can make or break you. Please know the difference between the different severities of ASD, okay? Now, social pragmatic communication disorder. It's different from autism, although some of them are kind of similar, but not too much. You will be able to tell the difference between these two disorders. So when it comes to the social pragmatic communication disorder, this is your social purposes, and you have deficits when it comes to the communications for that. How do you greet somebody? Do you greet them the correct way? Do you know how to greet the person? Sharing information appropriately. This is about even your tone that you're speaking to the person. So I do have a teenager that is actually diagnosed with this, where it's okay, this information that you're sharing right now, is it appropriate to to the setting that you're speaking about right now, right? The impairment in change of communication to match the context, right? I have some kids that are like I just said, is that appropriate for this setting right now? You're speaking differently. Like in a classroom, these are not the topics that we talk about. At home, you may talk about this. In therapy, you may talk about this. But in the classroom, we shouldn't be talking about that, right? And you may talk differently to certain adults or whatever. And now also this kid is just like, why do you speak to her that way, but then you speak to me differently, right? Following rules or conversations for storytelling. Can you let the other person finish talking before you interrupt, right? The misunderstanding, even when it comes to conversation, the nonverbal and the verbal signals that the person may be using or the other person is using, where it's like, do you not understand right now? I don't want to talk to you right now, but you're sitting here still talking to me and telling me this story. That's social pragmatic communication disorder, right? Also, inferences, idioms, humors, and the metaphors. Again, it's like, do they understand it? Do they get it? Same way sometimes with kids on the spectrum. If they cannot clock that, the humor and the metaphors and the inferences that you're making, it could upset them. There was another student that was like that, where it was like, you tell her a joke and it's like, I don't get it. Like, what are you talking about right now? When another person is like, when you're telling a joke in the middle of a conversation, you might laugh and you move on from that. But they may become stuck on that because it's just like, I don't understand it. That's social pragmatic communication disorder. That's some of the similarities that a kid can also have that is diagnosed with ASD, right? Okay. Deficits result in functional limitations when it comes to effective communication. Academic achievement as well, individually or in combination with other people. Early developmental period, right? But it may not be fully apparent until social communications causes the person to show that these are the behaviors and the deficits that they lack when it comes to this disorder. Now, here's the thing. In order to be diagnosed with SPCD, your symptoms cannot be better explained by autism, intellectual disability, global developmental delay, or another mental disorder before you can be diagnosed with SPCD. Here is the SPCD versus ASD. Social emotional reciprocity, they are the same in that level. That's where they are similar, right? Do you understand how this other person is feeling right now? Do you understand how you are feeling right now? It's often impaired. The social emotional reciprocity, it's taking turns talking. It's not your turn to speak. Do not interrupt the other person in a conversation. Ideally, you listen when the other person is talking. You're not trying to talk at the same time with the other person. They are similar in that. Nonverbal communication, the gestures and the eye contact, similar with that. Remember what I said, the nonverbal cues and sometimes the verbal cues or whatever, and the gestures that you're doing. Like if you're sitting there having a conversation and your body language is saying, I don't want to talk to you right now, they may not be able to clock that. They may not be able to understand that because it's impaired, right? Restrictive repetitive behaviors is only in ASD. It is not required for a diagnosis of SPCD. It should not be in SPCD, right? Restricted and repetitive behaviors is required for the diagnosis of ASD. Onset in childhood, both. Literal versus abstract language and understanding, it's impaired in SPCD, but it's sometimes often impaired in ASD. These are the similarities and some of the differences of SPCD and ASD. Now, good old classic ADHD. If you have ADHD, you know what this diagnosis is like. If you have a child of yours that has ADHD, then you know what this disorder is like. If you work in a school and you see kids that have ADHD, you know exactly what this disorder is like. If you have family, friends, and work with some adults that have ADHD, you know exactly what this disorder is like. You must have the symptoms for 6 months, and it has to occur across multiple settings. It cannot just happen at home, and then when you get to school, now you're this perfect angel and you don't see none of these behaviors, right? Home, school, work, grocery store, amusement park. ADHD it does not discriminate against the environment that you're in. It's going to occur across multiple different environments, right? And it must be present before the age of 12. Has to be present before the age of 12, and it can affect adults, adolescents, as well as children, right? And these are just some of your symptoms of ADHD. Like I said, take a look at the screen. if you have it, if you work with kids that has it, you know exactly what the symptoms of ADHD are. They don't want to seem to listen. They don't want to do anything you tell them to do. 1 minute they over here, the next minute they over there. I got kids that are just like, they sit in a chair for literally 2 minutes, and then next thing you know, they are walking around, mindlessly just walking around, can't keep their attention span, starting something and then they don't finish it, forget activities, they forget things, and they're easily distracted by anybody. A pen drop on the floor, and now they're trying to find out who dropped the pen instead of doing a math assignment. That's just a simple example. But yes, hyperactivity and impulsivity, squirming in the seats, hard to stay seated, fidgets, tapping of the leg constantly. You can't play quietly. I have kids that just can't play quietly. They are always so loud, always on the go, talking excessively. Oh my God, and I have this one kid that's like, I can't be patient. No, it's not that you can't be patient. You got ADHD, right? Difficulty just waiting, whether if it's waiting your turn or waiting for something else to happen, interrupting, not allowing the other person to finish speaking before they put their 2 cents in, right? And again, like I said, leaving a seat without permission, can't stay seated. This is going to be your differences between autism spectrum disorder and the social pragmatic communication disorder. We actually just went through this, but this is just a little bit more in depth. So if you would like some of these screenshots, because this is how I learned. I always made a chart so that I can see, like, oh, okay, I get it. This is some of the impairments in this one, and these are the impairments in the other. This happens in this disorder, but it does not occur in this disorder. And then there are also similarities, right? So if you would like to look at these in more depth, just let me know, and I can send you the PDF format to the difference between autism spectrum disorder and the social pragmatic disorder. And then I also went ahead and did the difference between ID and autism spectrum disorder. It's like, it's a major difference, but it's nice to kind of like see them side by side with each other and understanding them, right? And even the onset of ID is evident during childhood before the age of 18, and as well as autism spectrum disorder is evident in early developmental period, right? Adaptive functioning is a part of ID, where the social communication and the behavior patterns is a part of autism spectrum disorder, right? And then I have ADHD and then autism spectrum disorder, where there are the similarities and the differences, but to be honest with you, some of them are kind of like run along the lines of each other, but you can definitely tell the huge difference between ADHD, right, and autism spectrum disorder, where ADHD is more like the inattention, the impulsivity, and the hyperactivity, and autism spectrum disorder is more about your social communication deficit and some of those repetitive and the restrictive behaviors and the interests that a child may have. Those are some of your major differences of ADHD and ASD. Now, those were your neurodevelopmental disorders. It's a lot. I know it's a lot. But like I said, this is not always just about how you're going to take this exam. Maybe you need more information on how you're going to work with your clients or help your family, and this may make that difference for you. So if you have any questions, comments, or concerns about the disorders that I just went over, please feel free to leave me a message on Facebook. Share this video with anybody else that needs this information. I am definitely okay with that. I hope each and every one of you enjoy the rest of your day, and now that you have a clear understanding of the neurodevelopmental disorders, you will know how to navigate these types of questions when you see them on the MFT National Exam.